Welcome to the Daily English Practice channel. We are incredibly glad you decided to tune in today.
Absolutely. It's great to be here.
And for those of you who use this channel specifically to improve your listening comprehension, I want to assure you right off the bat that we're going to be speaking very clearly and deliberately today.
Right. Taking our time.
Exactly. We're taking our time to really unpack these concepts step by step so that absolutely nothing gets lost in translation.
And I have to say, there are a lot of concepts to unpack today. I mean, the material we're looking at is dense, but it is also incredibly rewarding.
It really is.
Yeah.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into what might be the ultimate mystery of human existence.
That's a big claim.
This is a big claim, but we're asking a question that sounds very simple on the surface, but actually has an unbelievably complex answer. And that question is, why do you do the things you do? And I mean you, specifically the person listening to this right now. Every single choice you make, from what you decide to eat for lunch today, all the way to major career-defining ethical dilemmas you might face at work.
It's all connected.
Yes, every choice is actually a battleground. It's a continuous, fascinating struggle of brain chemistry, psychological shortcuts, and moral philosophy.
That is really the perfect way to frame it. You know, we so often think of our decision-making as this purely rational, almost mathematical process.
Like a computer.
Exactly, like a computer. We like to believe that we sit down, we carefully weigh the pros and cons, and then we just output the best possible logical choice.
But the stack of sources we're examining today paints a very different picture.
A much messier picture, ranging from neuroscience papers on dopamine to behavioral psychology studies, and even advanced academic critiques of corporate ethics. They reveal a reality that is far more dynamic.
A tug of war.
A massive tug of war. You've got your biology pulling you one way, your hidden mental biases pulling another way, and somewhere in the middle of all that is your capacity for free will.
And the wildest part to me is that almost all of this happens completely beneath the surface of your conscious awareness.
It does.
So our mission for this deep dive is to pull back that curtain. We are going to synthesize this massive stack of complex sources into one cohesive journey for you.
And by the end of our discussion, you are going to have a completely new lens through which to view your own daily choices.
I promise you that. So where do we even begin with a topic this massive?
Well, if we really want to understand the mind, we have to start by looking at the hardware.
The brain itself.
Right, the physical brain. We need to dive into the biological foundation of choice, which means talking about dopamine, and a concept known in behavioral economics as intertemporal choice.
Okay, let me just stop you right there. Intertemporal choice. That sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie. Are we talking about time travel here?
It does sound a bit like time travel, doesn't it? But it's actually just a fancy academic term for a dilemma that every single human being faces multiple times a day.
Okay.
It is the classic struggle of choosing between a smaller reward that you can have right this very second versus a much larger reward that you have to wait for.
Oh, I see.
In the scientific literature, they usually call it a smaller, sooner reward versus a larger, later reward.
Ah, okay. So it's basically the classic marshmallow test, but for adults.
Exactly.
Like, do I eat one marshmallow right now, or do I wait 15 minutes for two marshmallows?
Yeah.
Or do I buy that brand new pair of shoes today, or do I put that money into a retirement account so I can have a comfortable life 30 years from now?
Precisely. It's the battle between the present and the future. And for a very long time, the traditional scientific view, the absolute standard assumption across all of neuroscience, was that dopamine was the primary chemical hero responsible for helping us delay gratification.
Really? Because I have to be honest, when I hear the word dopamine, I usually think of the exact opposite. I think of instant gratification.
Most people do.
Yeah, I think of scrolling on social media or eating junk food and getting that quick, addictive chemical hit.
And that is exactly why this topic is so fascinating. The old academic theory was that dopamine promoted the pursuit of highly valuable long-term goals by increasing our tolerance for the costs associated with them.
The costs.
Right. And in the case of intertemporal choice, the cost isn't money. The cost is time.
The pain of waiting.
Yes, the psychological pain of waiting. The prevailing theory was that higher dopamine levels in specific regions of your brain give you the motivational fuel you need to endure that wait for the larger later reward.
So just to make sure I'm following, under that old assumption, if I have a lot of dopamine actively working in my system, I am much more likely to save for retirement instead of buying the shoes today.
That was the firmly held belief. But recent studies, which are detailed quite extensively in our sources, have uncovered a massive paradox that completely challenges this traditional view.
Okay, I love a good scientific paradox. Walk me through it.
So, researchers wanted to see what would actually happen if they manipulated this system directly. They set up a study to artificially lower dopamine activity in the brain.
Okay.
Now, according to the traditional view we just talked about, what should happen if you lower a person's dopamine?
Well, logically, if dopamine is the fuel that gives you the patience to wait for a big reward, then lowering it should make you completely impatient.
Right.
People should lose their ability to tolerate the cost of time entirely. They should just immediately grab the smaller, sooner reward because they lack the chemical motivation to hold out for the bigger prize.
That is exactly what the entire scientific community expected to happen. But the study found the exact opposite.
The opposite.
Yes. When scientists blocked specific dopamine receptors, intentionally lowering the dopamine activity, the participants actually preferred the delayed, larger rewards more.
Wait,
They became significantly more patient.
really? Lowering the motivation chemical made them more willing to wait. That doesn't seem to make any sense at all.
It was a very shocking finding. And it forced researchers to completely rethink the mechanical function of dopamine in decision-making. To understand how they solved this mystery, we really need to look closely at how this specific study was designed.
Let's do it.
It really is a beautiful piece of experimental science.
Let's break it down for the listener. I want to know exactly how they proved this.
All right. The researchers gathered 56 healthy participants, and they used what is called a double-blind, placebo-controlled crossover design.
Okay, let's pause and define that for our listeners who might not be familiar with clinical trial terminology. Double-blind means that neither the participants taking the pills nor the actual researchers handing out the pills knew who was getting the real drug and who was getting a fake sugar pill.
The placebo, yes.
Right. And they do that to prevent anyone's expectations from unconsciously skewing the results, correct?
Exactly. It removes human bias from the observation. And the crossover part of the design means that every single participant eventually took both the real drug and the placebo on different days.
Oh, I see.
This is crucial because it allows the researchers to compare how a person's choices change against their own baseline. They aren't just comparing one group of people to a completely different group of people.
That makes it a much more rigorous setup. So what was the actual drug they were using to lower the dopamine?
They used a medication called amisulpride.
Amisulpride.
Yes. In this specific targeted dosage, amisulpride acts as an antagonist for the D2 dopamine receptors in the brain.
Antagonist, meaning it blocks the receptor, like putting tape over a keyhole so the key can't go in.
That is a brilliant analogy, yes. It binds to the receptor without actually activating it, and that physical block prevents the real dopamine from getting in and doing its job.
Which effectively lowers the dopamine activity in that specific part of the brain.
Correct. So, under the influence of this amisulpride, these 56 participants were asked to make a series of financial choices.
Were they real money choices?
Yes, involving actual Swiss francs. The participants sat at a computer and were repeatedly asked to choose between getting a smaller amount of cash, immediately say 20 Swiss francs right there on the spot, or a larger amount of cash delayed by up to 60 days.
So maybe 50 Swiss francs, but you have to wait 2 whole months to get it.
Exactly. And just to reiterate the result, because this is the really mind-blowing part.
Please do.
When the participants had their D2 receptors completely blocked by the amisulpride, they consistently chose the 50 francs in 2 months. They were suddenly totally fine with waiting.
They chose the larger, later option significantly more often than when they were just taking the placebo.
Yes. And to solve why this counterintuitive thing was happening, the researchers realized that the old way of looking at decision-making was just structurally flawed.
How so?
They needed a new framework, so they utilized a mathematical model called the drift diffusion model, or DDM.
The drift diffusion model. Okay, I'm going to need you to unpack that one slowly for me.
You will. It completely changes how we visualize the literal act of making a choice. Usually we think of a decision as a single, instantaneous flash of thought.
Like a light bulb going off.
Right. You look at 2 options and boom, you've made a decision. But the drift diffusion model explains that making a decision is actually a physical process that unfolds over time in the brain.
Even if it's really fast.
Even if that time is measured in mere milliseconds, yes. It is a process of gathering evidence. It's an accumulation of information slowly moving toward a threshold. And this process, according to the model, has 2 very distinct subcomponents.
Okay, I'm picturing a scale balancing, or maybe a bucket slowly filling up with water until it tips over. What are the two subcomponents?
The first subcomponent is called the starting bias. And I think the best way to visualize this is like the starting line of a foot race,
Okay.
but it is not a fair race. This bias represents the incredible power of proximity.
Proximity, like just how physically or temporally close something is to you.
Exactly. When a reward is right in front of you, something you can reach out and grab right this very second, it has an incredible magnetic pull on your brain.
Just because it's there.
Yes, your brain is automatically biased toward it simply because it exists in the present moment. It is tangible. The delayed reward, the 50 francs in 2 months, is just an abstract concept in the future, but the immediate reward is here.
So the starting line of the race isn't even.
No. The starting line of the decision-making race is actually shifted much closer to the immediate reward before the starting gun even fires.
Okay, that makes perfect sense to me. Like, if I'm holding a chocolate bar in my hand, my brain is already heavily leaning toward eating it, regardless of my long-term diet goals.
It's a very strong pull.
So how does dopamine factor into this starting line?
This is where the major breakthrough happened. The researchers discovered that dopamine is the specific chemical that actually mediates this magnetic pull of the immediate reward.
Oh.
Yes. When the participants were given the amisulpride and their D2 receptors were blocked, it effectively weakened this proximity advantage.
Oh, wow. Okay, so lowering the dopamine didn't make them lose their motivation to wait. It actually removed the massive distraction of the shiny object right in front of them.
Precisely. The starting line shifted back to the center. The brain was no longer being aggressively pulled by the mere fact that the smaller reward was available right now.
It leveled the playing field.
It completely leveled.
That is fascinating. But you mentioned there's a second subcomponent to this drift diffusion model. If the starting line is the first part, what's the second?
The second subcomponent is called the drift rate.
Drift rate.
Right. If the starting bias is where the race begins, the drift rate is how fast you are running toward a conclusion. This is the actual ongoing mathematical calculation your brain is making.
The actual weighing of the options.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is the part of the process that is asking, is this actually worth it? This is your internal cost control mechanism.
So this is the part evaluating the actual size of the rewards, rather than just how close they are in time.
Exactly. And here is what happened under the influence of the dopamine blocking drug. The participants became much, much stricter about the absolute size of the reward.
Stricter how?
When their D2 receptors were blocked, they demanded a significantly larger payoff to justify the wait. If the delayed reward was only slightly larger than the immediate one, say 20 francs now versus maybe 22 francs in 2 months, they decided it just wasn't worth the wait at all.
Okay, let me see if I can put this into a real-world scenario to make sure I'm really grasping this and to make it relatable for you listening.
I think an example would be great.
Let's say it's Friday night and you're trying to decide where to eat dinner. Option A is an average, somewhat boring fast food restaurant, but it is literally right next door to your apartment. You can be eating in 5 minutes.
That is your smaller, sooner reward.
Right. Option B is a phenomenal 5-star gourmet restaurant, but it's all the way across town. You have to walk, and it is pouring rain outside.
Okay, so that is your larger, later reward. And the cost is the long, uncomfortable walk in the rain.
Exactly. So under normal circumstances, with your normal everyday dopamine levels, that fast food place next door has a huge magnetic pull just because it's so easy and immediate. Your starting bias is heavily skewed toward option A.
Correct.
But if I were to take this amisulpride drug, blocking my D2 receptors, that magnetic pull of the fast food place basically disappears. I'm no longer tempted simply by the convenience. I'm actually willing to walk across town in the rain.
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
But, and this is the crucial condition based on that second subcomponent, the drift rate, you will only do it if the reward is massive.
Because my cost control mechanism is now highly sensitive.
Right. You will only make that walk in the rain if you are absolutely certain that the 5-star restaurant is truly going to be a 5-star life-changing meal.
So if I look at the menu online and realize it's actually just a slightly above average bistro.
Your brain says, nope, the payoff is not big enough to justify the cost of the walk.
This is blowing my mind a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it means dopamine isn't just a simple motivation volume dial that you just turn up or down.
Not at all.
It's actually a highly complex mixing board. It independently tunes two very different things at the exact same time. It tunes how much we care about the weight, and it tunes how much we care about the size of the prize.
You've hit the nail on the head. And there is one more layer to this biology that the sources point out, which is really crucial for our understanding of how this works.
What's that?
We have to carefully distinguish between the different flavors of dopamine in the brain.
Flavors of dopamine. I didn't realize it came in different flavors or speeds.
It does. In neuroscience, the technical terms are phasic dopamine and tonic dopamine.
Phasic and tonic.
Right. Phasic dopamine refers to fast, sudden spikes in the chemical. These quick bursts are primarily used by the brain for learning.
Learning.
Yes. They happen when a reward surprises us or when an outcome is significantly better than we expected. It's a quick signal to the rest of the brain that says, hey, pay attention to what you just did. That was really good.
Oh, like the ping on your phone when you get a text from someone you really like. Just a quick spike of excitement.
Exactly like that. But tonic dopamine is completely different. Tonic dopamine refers to the slow, steady, continuous background levels of the chemical in the brain.
The background levels.
Think of it like the ambient room temperature, rather than a sudden blast of hot air from a furnace.
Okay, so how does that relate to our walking in the rain restaurant decision?
The researchers actually proved that these complex cost-benefit evaluations, the intertemporal choices we've been talking about, are governed entirely by the slow tonic dopamine levels acting on the D2 receptors.
Really? How do they know that for sure?
Because they ran another study right alongside it. They used a completely different drug that specifically stimulates D1 receptors, which are the ones associated with those fast phasic spikes.
What happened when they did that?
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. Stimulating the fast phasic dopamine showed zero effect on the participants' intertemporal choices. It proved definitively that the complex cost-benefit weighting game is a highly specific function of the ambient tonic dopamine environment in your brain.
Wow. Okay, so if I'm summarizing this first major pillar of our deep dive today, our brain chemistry, specifically this ambient temperature of dopamine, firmly sets the stage for how we value time and reward.
It does.
It dictates our baseline patience and our baseline demand for a payoff.
Beautifully summarized.
But obviously, we aren't just walking chemistry sets. We don't just calculate time and money all day long.
No, we don't. The biology is just the foundation. If our neurochemistry builds the stage, it is our cognitive processes, our psychology, that writes the actual script of our daily lives.
So let's pivot the conversation there. Let's move from the microscopic chemical level up to the psychological level.
That's the natural next step.
Because if my brain is doing these incredibly complex, multivariable mathematical calculations just to decide whether to walk to a restaurant, how does it not just completely overheat and shut down?
It's a fair question.
I mean, we make thousands of choices every single day.
Yeah.
I'm deciding what clothes to wear, which route to drive to work, how to politely respond to a passive-aggressive email. My brain can't possibly be running a full drift diffusion model for every single one of those, right?
It definitely isn't. The human brain is a remarkable organ, obviously, but it has severe limitations when it comes to energy and processing power.
It burns calories.
It burns a massive amount of glucose. Conscious, deliberate calculation is exhausting. If you tried to mathematically calculate the optimal choice for every minor decision in your day, you would be paralyzed. You would literally never make it out of bed in the morning.
Analysis paralysis.
Exactly. So, over millions of years of evolution, the human brain developed a brilliant workaround. It relies on something called heuristics.
Heuristics. I have definitely heard the term, but let's define it very clearly for the listeners.
Heuristics are essentially mental shortcuts.
Shortcuts.
Yes. They are the brain's autopilot system. They are simple, highly efficient rules of thumb that allow us to make rapid judgments and solve problems quickly, saving us an immense amount of time and mental energy.
I love the idea of the brain having an autopilot. It makes a lot of sense from an evolutionary survival standpoint.
It kept us alive.
Right. If a tiger jumps out of the bushes, you really don't want your brain running a slow, tonic, dopamine, cost-benefit analysis on the physics of running away.
You'd be eaten.
Exactly. You just want a shortcut that says big teeth equals run right now.
And our sources detail a few very specific heuristics that still heavily govern our modern lives today, long after the tigers are gone.
Okay, let's go through them.
The first one is incredibly common. It is called the availability heuristic.
The availability heuristic. What does that one do?
It occurs when you judge how likely something is to happen or how common something is, based purely on how easily you can remember examples of it happening.
How easily it's available in your memory.
Precisely. If a memory is easily available to your conscious mind, you automatically, unconsciously assume the event is highly probable.
Oh, I see. Okay, let me think of a real-world example for this. Shark attacks.
Oh, that's a classic one.
I feel like whenever I go to the beach, There is always a tiny part of my brain that is genuinely worried about a shark attack, even though I know logically it is incredibly rare.
But why is it worried?
Because every time there is a shark attack anywhere in the world, it is all over the news. There are movies about it, like Jaws. The imagery is so vivid and terrifying that it is instantly available in my memory.
Yes.
Meanwhile, I read somewhere that falling coconuts actually kill more people every year than sharks do. But nobody is terrified of walking under a palm tree.
That is a phenomenal example, and it perfectly captures how the shortcut works. The sources actually use the classic example of commercial airplane travel to illustrate this.
Oh, fear of flying.
Exactly. Statistically speaking, traveling by commercial airliner is incredibly safe. The math proves it is far safer than driving a car down the highway.
Right, everyone knows that statistic.
Yet, a massive percentage of the population has a deep, visceral fear of flying, while they will happily text and drive their car at 60 miles an hour without a second thought.
Because when a plane does crash, it is a huge, tragic international news event. It dominates the headlines for weeks.
Yes, the images are terrifying, and they stick in our memories. So when your brain asks the question, is flying safe? Those vivid examples of plane crashes are instantly available to your memory retrieval system.
Which causes you to wildly overestimate the actual statistical risk.
Exactly. Car crashes happen constantly, sadly, but they rarely make international news, so they aren't as easily available to your memory. The shortcut fails you.
Wow. Okay, so our brain basically substitutes easily remembered for highly probable.
That's a great way to put it.
What's another one of these shortcuts?
Another major one discussed in the sources is the representativeness heuristic.
Representativeness.
This happens when we judge a situation or an object or even a person based on how closely they match a stereotype or a typical case in our minds, rather than looking at the actual objective data.
So it's the whole, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it must be a duck philosophy.
Yes. But the problem is, your brain will automatically assume it's a duck, even if the statistical probability of a duck being in that specific location is literally 0.
You are substituting a visual or conceptual similarity for actual probability.
Exactly. You are relying on the stereotype instead of the math.
We will definitely come back to that one because I know there is a really interesting experiment related to it later in the sources.
Yes, the Ryan from Virginia study.
Right. But before we get there, are there any heuristics that are based purely on feeling rather than memory or stereotypes?
There are, and perhaps the most powerful one of all is the affect heuristic.
Affect. Spelled A-F-F-E-C-T.
Correct. Now, in the field of psychology, the word affect generally refers to emotion. This heuristic describes how our immediate gut emotional response to a choice can completely bypass our detailed logical analysis.
How does an emotion completely bypass logic? I thought they operated in completely different parts of the brain.
They do, but they are highly connected neural networks. The sources reference the work of Antonio Damasio, who is a very prominent neuroscientist. He proposed what is called the somatic marker hypothesis.
Somatic.
Yeah.
Meaning related to the physical body.
Correct. Damasio proposed that our past experiences leave physical emotional markers in our bodies.
Okay.
When we face a new decision that is somehow similar to a past experience, our body actually generates a physical feeling before our conscious brain has even fully processed the scenario.
Oh, like when you have to give a public speech and you instantly get that flutter in your stomach or your palms get sweaty.
Yes, or a tightness in your chest when you are about to sign a very risky financial contract.
Yeah.
That physical emotional reaction is a somatic marker.
I see.
And the affect heuristic means that we often let that immediate physical feeling guide our choice instantly before the logical brain even has a chance to boot up and look at the spreadsheet. If it feels bad physically, we vote no. If it feels exciting, we vote yes.
So these heuristics, availability, representativeness, affect, they sound incredibly efficient. They keep us moving through the day without getting paralyzed by analysis.
They do.
But clearly they aren't perfect. What happens when these shortcuts steer us in the wrong direction?
That is the crucial question. When heuristics fail, they don't just create random mistakes, they create systematic, predictable errors in our thinking.
Predictable errors.
Yes, and in psychology, these predictable errors are known as cognitive biases.
Cognitive biases.
If heuristics are the highly efficient shortcuts we take through the mental forest, cognitive biases are the hidden ditches we repeatedly fall into because we aren't looking closely at the path.
I love that analogy. Cognitive biases. That is a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot in business and psychology today.
It does, but it's important to understand the mechanics of them.
Let's actually define a few of the major blind spots mentioned in the sources.
Yeah.
And for you listening, I really want you to think about whether you have fallen into these ditches yourself. I know I certainly have.
We all have.
Let's start with a really big one. Confirmation bias.
This is perhaps the most dangerous bias for objective analysis, particularly in fields like business management or scientific research.
Why is it so dangerous?
Confirmation bias is the brain's tendency to actively search for, interpret, and heavily favor information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses.
While ignoring the rest.
Yes, while simultaneously ignoring or aggressively discounting any data that contradicts us.
Okay, I have a painfully personal example for this one.
Oh, let's hear it.
A few years ago, I decided to invest a significant amount of money in a specific tech company's stock. I had a gut feeling, maybe the affect heuristic at play there, that this company was going to be the next really big thing.
Okay.
After I bought the stock, I started reading articles about the company online. And I realized much later that I was only clicking on articles with titles like, "Why Company X is Poised for Massive Growth."
You were seeking validation.
Exactly. If I saw an article titled, "Warning Signs for Company X," I would just scroll right past it. Or I would read it and immediately tell myself that the author was an idiot and didn't know what they were talking about.
That is a textbook, perfect illustration of confirmation bias. You weren't actually looking for the truth, you were looking for comfort.
It's terrible for your portfolio.
It is. It acts as a psychological shield. It protects our ego from the pain of being wrong, but it severely harms our decision-making.
I can see that would ruin a business.
Oh, absolutely. In a corporate setting, imagine a manager proposes a radical new strategy. Instead of testing it rigorously and actively looking for ways it might fail, which is what a good scientist would do, they only gather data that supports their brilliant idea.
And they ignore the red flags.
Right. And by the time the strategy fails in the real world, everyone is completely surprised, even though the warning signs were there all along.
It's literally like putting on blinders. All right, what is another one? I saw anchoring bias in the notes, and it mentioned negotiations. How does that work?
Anchoring bias is fascinating because it shows how easily our perception of value can be manipulated by entirely irrelevant numbers.
Irrelevant numbers.
Yes. It explains that the very first piece of information offered in a negotiation, the anchor, heavily influences all subsequent decision-making.
Okay, let's walk through a hypothetical for this.
Yeah.
Let's say I am going to buy a used car. I've done my research online, and I know the fair market value for this specific car is about $10,000. I walk onto the lot, I find the car, and the salesperson comes up to me. How does the anchor get dropped?
Well, the salesperson probably knows you want to pay around $10,000, but before you can even make an offer, they say, "I'll let this beauty go today for $15,000.
And I immediately laugh in their face and say, that is ridiculous. I am not paying $15,000.
Yeah.
I haven't fallen for it.
Ah, but you likely have.
Really?
Yes. Consciously, you rejected the number, but subconsciously, that $15,000 just dropped to the bottom of your mental ocean like a heavy iron anchor.
Interesting.
It has shifted the entire framework of the negotiation. Your brain is now unconsciously using $15,000 as the baseline starting point, rather than the fair value of $10,000.
So even though I know 15 is crazy, it drags my perspective upward.
Exactly. So you start haggling, you negotiate aggressively, you threaten to walk away, and you finally get the salesperson to agree to $12,000.
And I drive off the lot feeling like a master negotiator because I talked them down $3,000 from their asking price.
But you still overpaid by $2,000.
Oh, wow.
Precisely. The anchor totally distorted your reality. You judged your success based on the distance from the anchor rather than the objective value of the car.
That happens all the time.
It happens constantly in salary negotiations, real estate pricing, and even retail sales where they show a crossed-out original price next to a sale price.
Oh, the fake original price.
Right. That original price is just an anchor to make you feel like you're getting an amazing deal.
That is so manipulative, but so effective. I am definitely going to be watching out for that from now on. The sources also briefly touch upon a few other biases that seem to compound these errors. Loss aversion is one.
Loss aversion is a fundamental principle of behavioral economics. It states that the psychological pain of losing something is roughly twice as powerful as the psychological joy of gaining that exact same thing.
Twice as powerful. So losing a $100 bill out of my wallet hurts me significantly more than the happiness I would feel if I found a $100 bill on the sidewalk.
Exactly. And because our brains are naturally wired to avoid that disproportionate pain of loss, it makes us irrationally conservative and risk-averse in many situations.
Like holding onto a bad stock.
Yes, we will often hold on to a bad investment that is actively losing money because finally selling it makes the loss real, whereas we will very quickly sell a winning investment just to lock in a small gain.
And the final bias mentioned is overconfidence, which seems pretty self-explanatory. We just think we're better at things than we actually are.
Basically, yes. We systematically overestimate our own skills, our knowledge, and our ability to predict the future.
Right.
The classic statistical joke is that if you survey a room full of people, 80% of them will rate themselves as above average drivers.
Which is mathematically impossible.
Completely impossible. But our overconfidence acts as an umbrella over all these other biases. We don't realize we're using heuristics, we don't realize we are anchored or seeking confirmation because we are so overly confident in our own rationality.
Okay, I have to be honest. Sitting here listening to this, it paints a pretty bleak picture of humanity.
It can feel that way.
We have a brain driven by ambient chemical temperatures, navigating a highly complex world using mental shortcuts that frequently lead to irrational, biased errors, and we are too overconfident to even realize it's happening. Is there any hope for us? Are we just doomed to be irrational creatures?
Well, for a very long time, mainstream psychology actually agreed with that somewhat bleak assessment. And this brings us to a major turning point in our deep dive today. We really need to talk about Daniel Kahneman's famous dual process theory.
I have definitely heard of this. This is the big idea from his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, right?
Yes, exactly. For decades, Kahneman's dual process theory has totally dominated our understanding of how the human mind works. He proposed that we essentially have two distinct systems of thinking.
System 1 and System 2.
Right. System 1 is fast, automatic, unconscious, and highly emotional. It operates with zero effort. This is the system that is responsible for all the heuristics and biases we just spent the last 20 minutes talking about.
Okay, so System 1 is the autopilot. It's the gut feeling. What is System 2?
System 2 is slow, deliberate, conscious, and highly analytical. It requires a lot of energy and intense focus.
It burns the glucose.
Exactly. This is the system you use when you are trying to solve a complex algebra equation, or fill out your tax returns, or carefully weigh the pros and cons of a job offer.
So under this classic theory, System 1 is kind of a villain, or at least the troublemaker. It's the reckless driver jumping to biased conclusions based on stereotypes and anchors. And System 2 is the hero. It's the responsible adult that has to step in, burn a bunch of energy, and correct all the silly mistakes made by System 1. We essentially blame System 1 for our flaws, and we rely on System 2 to save us from our own intuition.
That has absolutely been the accepted narrative for a long time. But here is where the story gets an incredible, almost cinematic plot twist.
A plot twist in behavioral psychology. I love it. What is the twist?
The sources we are reviewing today introduce groundbreaking new research by psychologists Wim Deneys and Gordon Pennycook.
Okay.
Their work completely turns Kahneman's classic theory upside down.
Really? How?
They introduce what we might call dual process theory 2.0. Their research reveals a profound new truth about the human brain. We do not just have emotional, biased intuitions. Deep within System 1, we actually have hidden logical intuition.
Logical intuitions. But I thought intuition, by definition, was a feeling, not a logical thought.
That is exactly why this is a monumental shift in how we understand ourselves. Deneys and Pennycook argue that basic logical and statistical principles can actually become so deeply ingrained in our neural pathways that they operate automatically, just like our biases do.
That's incredible.
We don't always need to sit down with a pen and paper and consciously engage the slow System 2 to be logical. Sometimes our fast System 1 is perfectly mathematically logical all on its own.
Okay, I am going to need some hard proof for this because it sounds almost too good to be true. How do you even test for a hidden logical intuition?
To prove this, the researchers designed some truly mind-bending experimental puzzles. Let's walk through one of the most famous ones. It is called the bat and ball problem.
All right, I'm ready. Let me see if my System 1 is as smart as you say it is.
I am going to give you and our listeners a very simple math puzzle. Try to answer it as quickly as possible with the very first number that pops into your head.
Got it.
Here is the puzzle. A baseball bat and a baseball together cost a total of $1.10.
Okay, total is $1.10.
The bat costs exactly $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost?
10 cents, obviously.
Okay.
$1.10 separated into $1.10.
And that is exactly what almost everyone says.
Right.
Your system 1 heard the numbers $1.10 and $1, and it jumped to a fast, intuitive, and completely incorrect conclusion.
Wait, I'm wrong. Let me think about this. Let me boot up my system too.
Take your time.
Okay, if the ball costs 10 cents and the bat costs exactly $1 more than the ball, that means the bat would cost $1.10. So a $1.10 bat plus a 10-cent ball is $1.20. Oh, wow. I am an idiot. The math doesn't work.
Don't feel bad, even MIT students get this wrong on the first try. The actual correct answer is that the ball costs 5 cents.
5 cents.
Right. If the ball is 5 cents and the bat is $1 more, the bat is $1.05. Add them together and you get exactly $1.10.
Okay, so I totally failed. My system 1 jumped to a biased, lazy conclusion. Doesn't this just prove the old theory? It just proves system 1 is bad at math and I need to slowly use system 2 to find the 5-cent answer. Where's the logical intuition you promised?
It is hidden in your reaction. Under the old theory, yes, this just proves system 1 is flawed. But the new researchers did something brilliant. They used what they call a conflict detection paradigm.
What does that mean? How do you measure a conflict?
They didn't just ask for the answer. They actively measured how people's brains reacted while they were giving the wrong answer. They timed the responses down to the millisecond, and they had participants rate their own confidence levels.
And what did they find?
What is absolutely fascinating here is that even when people confidently blurt out the wrong answer of 10 cents, scientists found a hidden hesitation.
A hesitation.
Yes. The participants took slightly longer to answer the bat and ball problem, and they felt slightly less confident about their answer compared to when they were given a simple control version of the puzzle without the math trick.
Let me make sure I am understanding this. You are saying that even as my mouth is forming the words 10 cents, my brain is actually sending out a subtle warning signal.
Precisely. It proves that deep down in your subconscious, your brain instinctively knows that you are violating a mathematical rule.
That is wild.
The brain detects the conflict between the lazy answer and the hidden logic. You sense that something is slightly off, that the math doesn't quite work, even if you don't consciously stop to do the algebra to figure out exactly why.
That is incredible. So my brain actually knows I'm wrong before I know I'm wrong. The alarm is going off. I just usually choose to ignore it.
Exactly. And they ran another famous experiment to prove this applies to statistics, not just algebra. It is called the base rate neglect problem.
Let's do it. I want a chance to redeem myself.
Let me give you another scenario from the sources. We are going to use the representativeness heuristic we discussed earlier, the whole stereotype shortcut.
Right.
Let's imagine a man named Ryan. Ryan lives in a very rural part of the state of Virginia. Ryan drives a massive pickup truck. He loves watching American football on Sundays. He wears the jerseys of his favorite players, and he spends his weekends hanging out at sports bars with his buddies.
Sounds like a fun guy.
Based on that description, I want you to guess. Is Ryan's favorite drink beer, or is it a glass of fine wine?
Okay, well, my immediate intuitive guess is beer. The description perfectly matches the cultural stereotype of a beer-drinking football fan. If it looks like a duck, it drinks beer.
And that is your System 1 using a stereotype shortcut. But here's the statistical catch. The researchers tell the participants that Ryan was randomly selected from a specific room of 1,000 people.
Okay, 1,000 people.
And in that room, 995 of the people are wine drinkers, and only 5 of them are beer drinkers.
Oh, I see the trap. Let me work this out loud. My brain hears truck and football and immediately shouts beer. But you were telling me I have to look at the room?
Look at the base rate.
Right. If there are 1,000 people and 995 of them only drink wine, then statistically, even if Ryan is the most stereotypical beer-loving guy on the planet, the odds are overwhelmingly high that he is actually one of the 995 wine drinkers.
Exactly. Logically, the base rate, the fundamental statistical probability, dictates that Ryan is almost certainly a wine drinker, regardless of what kind of truck he drives. The stereotype points to beer, but the cold, hard math points to wine.
But I'm guessing most people still just say beer because the stereotype is so vividly distracting.
They do. Most people still guess beer. But again, their brain measurements reveal that hidden conflict detection. Their subconscious processes the base rate statistics automatically.
A silent alarm.
Yes. A quiet alarm goes off in their brain, signaling a conflict between the stereotype they want to believe and the statistical reality. They take longer to say beer, and they feel less confident about it. The logical intuition is there, actively fighting against the bias.
This is completely changing how I view my own thought process. It is like I have a silent mathematician living in my subconscious.
It really is. And the sources mention one more experiment that seems to be the ultimate proof of this. They call it the logic liking paradigm.
The logic liking paradigm. I have to admit, reading the notes, this was the most mind-blowing finding to me.
It truly pushes the boundaries of how we understand cognition. In this experiment, researchers didn't ask the participants to solve any math problems or probability puzzles at all.
Oh, math.
No math. They just showed participants a series of statements on a computer screen. Some of the statements were logically valid syllogisms, things like, all mammals are animals, a dog is a mammal, therefore a dog is an animal.
Sound logic.
And some of the statements were structurally invalid, completely illogical. But here is the twist. They didn't ask the participants to evaluate the logic. They simply asked the participants to look at the sentences and rate how much they visually liked them.
Like them.
Yes. In some variations, they even just asked participants to rate how bright the text looked on the screen, or how physically pleasing the font was.
Wait, they were judging the aesthetic quality of a logical statement.
Yes, and the results were stunning. Across multiple trials, participants consistently rated the logically valid statements as more likable.
Just because they were logical.
Furthermore, they literally perceived the text of the logical statements as glowing brighter on the screen compared to the illogical statements.
I'm sorry, they saw logical sentences as physically brighter. How is that even neurologically possible?
If we connect this to the bigger picture of brain function, it means our brains have an innate aesthetic appreciation for logic.
An aesthetic appreciation.
Yes. When a statement is mathematically or logically sound, our neural pathways process it more fluently. The information flows smoothly without hitting any cognitive roadblocks.
Oh, I see.
And your conscious mind interprets that subconscious smoothness, the neurological ease, as a positive physical feeling. It translates the lack of mental friction into a feeling of liking the sentence more, or literally perceiving it as brighter and clearer.
Okay, let's synthesize this whole section because I want to make sure the listener is really grasping the magnitude of this.
Yeah.
For decades, we have been told that our initial gut reactions are usually wrong, and that we have to rely on slow, exhausting deliberation to be smart. But Dual Process Theory 2.0 says what exactly? What is the practical takeaway for the person listening to this right now?
The practical takeaway is incredibly empowering. It means you are actually smarter than you think you are. You do not always need to deliberate for hours to be logical. Sometimes your absolute best, most sound logic is a fast intuition.
Trust your gut, but the logical gut.
Exactly. The most effective thinkers and problem solvers out there don't necessarily sit around furrowing their brows and thinking harder than the rest of us. They just have better, highly automated logical intuitions. They have trained their System 1 to be smart. They have learned to tune in and listen to that subtle feeling of cognitive friction when something isn't quite right.
That is a profoundly optimistic view of human nature compared to where we started. Our biology gives us the raw materials with dopamine. Our psychology provides the necessary shortcuts, and we actually have a built-in compass that points toward logic if we just pay attention to it.
It's a beautiful system.
But we have to pivot the conversation now, because we are about to enter the most complex and arguably the most important layer of all.
I agree. Everything we've discussed so far has been largely computational. We've covered how we make choices about money, about time, about statistical probabilities. But human life isn't just a math problem.
Exactly. What happens when the choice isn't about whether to walk in the rain for a burger or guess Ryan's favorite drink? What happens when the choice is about right and wrong?
Morality.
Yes, it is time to transition into the ethics of choice. Because in the real world, especially if you work in a corporate environment or manage a team, your decisions have severe moral weight.
They absolutely do. And our sources provide a very deep dive into the academic frameworks that have been built to explain business ethics.
Now, before we jump into this, I want to offer a quick but very important disclaimer to our listeners.
Good idea.
Our goal in this next segment is to be completely 100% impartial. We are not here to take any moral sides. We are not endorsing any specific political ideology, and we aren't here to preach about what is objectively right or wrong. We are strictly reporting on the academic models that researchers have developed to study how people behave within organizations.
That is a vital clarification. We are looking at the architecture of moral decision-making, not the specific content of it. These frameworks are known in the literature as ethical decision-making models, or EDMMs. Academics have spent decades trying to build, essentially, a flowchart of the soul. They want to map out exactly how a business manager goes from recognizing a moral dilemma on their desk to actually taking an action. Let's look at three of the most prominent models discussed in our sources.
Let's do it.
Hmm.
The first one is called Trevino's interactionist model.
Yes. Trevino proposes that ethical decision-making isn't just about who you are or where you are, it's an interaction between the person and the situation.
Okay.
On the personal side, her model relies heavily on a famous psychological concept called Kohlberg's stages of cognitive moral development.
Kohlberg stages. I feel like I learned about that in a college psychology class, but I definitely need a refresher. What are the stages?
Kohlberg theorized that people grow through different sequential stages of moral reasoning throughout their lives. At the lowest stage, usually seen in children, morality is based entirely on a fear of punishment.
Like, I won't steal a cookie because mommy will yell at me.
Exactly. It's purely self-interest.
Okay, so what's a higher stage?
As you develop, you might reach a conventional stage where morality is based on social norms and laws. You might say, I won't steal because the law says it is wrong and society needs laws to function.
Obeying the rules.
Right. And at the highest, most developed stages, a person acts based on universal internal ethical principles, regardless of the law or social pressure. You would say, I won't steal because human property rights are a fundamental aspect of human dignity.
So Trevino's model says that your behavior in a business setting depends on what stage of moral development you have reached.
That is only half of it. The interactionist part of Trevino's model is the crucial addition. She says that your internal moral development isn't enough to predict your behavior on its own. It continuously interacts with external situational variables.
Situational variables.
This means the corporate culture you work in, the immediate demands of your boss, the pressure to meet a quarterly sales quota, all of these external factors heavily influence what you will actually do when faced with a dilemma.
So I might be a highly principled person at home, operating at a high level of moral development. But if I go to work in a toxic corporate culture, where my boss is screaming at me to hit a target by any means necessary, the situation might override my internal compass.
Exactly. The situation interacts with the individual to produce the final decision.
Makes sense. Let's contrast that with the second major framework, which is Hunt and Vattel's general theory of marketing ethics.
This one is quite interesting.
It seemed a bit more philosophical when I was reading the notes. It focuses on how professionals balance different types of ethical evaluations. Specifically, it looks at how individuals weigh deontological evaluations against teleological evaluations.
Yes, those are very heavy academic terms.
I struggled with them. Deonto what? Let's break those down into plain English.
Let's start with deontological evaluation. This is entirely rule-based reasoning. It asks a simple question. Is this action inherently right or wrong, regardless of what the outcome is? Am I breaking a fundamental rule or duty?
Okay, so thou shalt not lie is a deontological rule. It doesn't matter if lying would save someone's feelings. The rule is the rule.
Correct. Now, contrast that with teleological evaluation. This is consequence-based reasoning. It focuses entirely on the final result. It asks, what will happen if I do this? Will this action produce the greatest good for the greatest number of people?
Okay, let me try to put this into a workplace scenario to see if I understand the tension between the two.
Yeah.
Let's imagine I work at a grocery store. It is the end of the night, and company policy explicitly states that all unsold bread must be thrown in the dumpster. A homeless man comes to the back door, freezing and starving, asking for food.
A classic ethical dilemma.
Right. If I am using deontological reasoning, rule-based reasoning, I look at the company handbook. The rule says throw the bread away. Giving away inventory is theft. I have a duty to my employer, so I throw bread away.
Yes, that is a strict deontological evaluation.
But if I use teleological reasoning, consequence-based reasoning, I look at the outcome. If I follow the rule, bread rots in a dumpster and a man goes hungry. If I break the rule, the company loses $0 because the bread was garbage anyway and a man gets to eat. The consequence is overwhelmingly positive. So I give him the bread.
Precisely. Hunt and Vattel suggests that professionals don't just pick one or the other. When faced with a dilemma, our brains unconsciously run both of these evaluations simultaneously. We constantly weigh the rules against the consequences to form our final intention before we act.
That is a really clear way to look at the internal conflict we feel. Okay, the third major framework mentioned is Jones's issue contingent model. This one introduces a really fascinating concept called moral intensity.
Jones argues that the ethical decision-making process doesn't just depend on who you are or what the corporate culture is, it depends heavily on the specific nature of the issue itself. Not all moral dilemmas are created equal.
Right, because stealing a paperclip from the office supply closet feels very different than embezzling $1 million from the pension fund.
Exactly. And that feeling is what Jones calls moral intensity. He outlines several factors that crank up the intensity of a dilemma. You just hit on the first one. The magnitude of consequences. The bigger the harm, the higher the intensity. Another major factor is social consensus.
Social consensus meaning whether everyone agrees it is wrong.
Right. If you work in an industry where literally everyone accepts a certain shady accounting practice, the social consensus against it is extremely low, so the moral intensity feels low to you. But if you try a scheme that everyone in society universally condemns, the intensity spikes. Another factor is temporal immediacy.
Temporal immediacy.
If the harm caused by your decision is going to happen tomorrow, it feels incredibly intense. If the harm, say, environmental damage from a new product might happen 50 years from now to people you will never meet, the moral intensity drops significantly.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. Jones argues that an issue with high moral intensity will trigger a much more rigorous, stressful ethical evaluation process in the brain than a low-intensity issue.
These models are all incredibly detailed. Between Trevino, Hunt, and Vattel and Jones, they really seem to break down the human mind into flowcharts and variables. But the sources we have contain a pretty massive bombshell critique of all these models.
They do.
The critique comes from an academic named Max Torres. And to really understand why Torres is so critical, the sources say we have to look back at the recent history of business ethics.
Yes, historical context is everything here. Torres points out that business ethics didn't really exist as a major, serious field of academic study until after the 1980s. The 80s, particularly in American finance and on Wall Street, were famously dubbed the decade of greed.
Right, this is the era of the movie Wall Street. Greed is good, massive corporate raiders, huge insider trading scandals. There was a general sense of ethical collapse in the financial sector.
It was a very public crisis of confidence. This era prompted business schools and universities to panic. They urgently needed to figure out how to teach ethics to future managers to prevent these massive corporate scandals from happening again. They needed a curriculum. So researchers rushed to build these models to explain exactly how bad behavior happens so they could engineer ways to stop it.
And according to Torres, because they built these models in a panic to solve the Wall Street problem, they missed something fundamental. He has a specific critique of all these models. He calls all of them static models.
This is the core of the critique, and it is brilliant. A static model treats the human being like a highly complex but ultimately programmable machine. The model suggests that if you input an ethical dilemma and you apply the right environmental pressures like strict corporate codes of conduct, compliance training, and rewards or punishments, the machine will reliably output an ethical behavior.
So it views the person as a fixed entity just reacting to stimuli, like a thermostat responding to temperature in a room.
Exactly. But humans are not thermostats. We are not static machines. What Torres highlights is completely missing from these academic flowcharts is the very essence of humanity, human freedom and moral virtue.
I want to spend some real time here, because this feels like the climax of everything we have talked about today. How does a model miss human freedom?
To explain this, Torres references an anthropological model developed by a scholar named Juan Antonio Perez Lopez. Perez Lopez argues that humans are freely adaptive systems.
What does freely adaptive mean in this context? How is that different from interacting with an environment like Trevino said?
It is profoundly different. An interactionist model says the environment changes your decision. A freely adaptive model says your decisions change you.
Let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. We don't just make decisions. Our decisions actually make us.
Yes. Every single choice you make, big or small, literally changes who you are on the inside. You are not the same person after you make a choice as you were before. Through every decision, we experience positive or negative internal learning.
Okay, let's use an example to illustrate this. Let's say I am a salesperson, and I am very close to losing a massive contract. If I just tell one small lie about our product's capabilities, I can secure the deal and get a huge bonus. If I choose to lie, what happens under this freely adaptive model?
Under a static model, you just get the contract and maybe feel guilty. But under Perez Lopez's model, if you choose to lie, you don't just get the contract, you actually change your internal wiring. You have fundamentally altered your character. By choosing the lie, you have made it slightly easier for yourself to lie the next time. You have reduced your own capacity to recognize truth. You have adapted your internal system toward deception.
Well, and I assume the opposite is true as well. If I tell the truth and lose the contract, I might lose the money, but I strengthen my internal truth-telling muscle.
Precisely. Through these choices, we develop what Perez Lopez calls rationality and virtuality, which essentially means moral virtues. Things like prudence, fortitude, justice, and temperance. These aren't just abstract philosophical concepts you read about in a book. They are actual operational habits built through repeated free choices. You build the virtue of courage by repeatedly making courageous, difficult choices.
And this brings us right back to Tori's critique of the current business models. The problem with all the flowcharts is that they focus entirely on the process of preventing bad behavior. They want to know how to set up the corporate rules, the compliance cameras, and the HR policies to scare people out of stealing.
They are instrumentally trying to control human behavior to protect the company's bottom line.
But by doing so, they completely ignore the development of a virtuous character. They forget that the goal of ethics shouldn't just be to build a rigid system where bad people are too scared of getting fired to do bad things. The ultimate goal should be to understand how human freedom allows us to cultivate managers of deep, genuine integrity.
That is the paradigm shift. If you only build compliance systems, you just build smarter criminals who figure out how to bypass the system. If you acknowledge human freedom and focus on the development of virtue, you build people who won't steal even when the compliance cameras are turned off.
Let's bring this all together for you, the listener. We have traveled an immense, incredibly fascinating distance today. We started at the absolute microscopic level. We looked at how the slow, ambient drip of tonic dopamine in our brain's receptors dictates the baseline of how we value time and reward. We explored how our brains, desperate to save energy, rely on heuristics, mental shortcuts that inevitably lead us into predictable ditches like confirmation bias and anchoring bias.
We learned how fragile our conscious rationality can be when faced with the magnetic pull of an immediate reward or a vivid available memory.
But we also discovered a profound source of hope. We are not entirely at the mercy of our emotional biases. Deep within our fast-thinking system 1, we possess hidden logical intuitions. Our brains automatically subconsciously detect when something doesn't add up mathematically or statistically. We possess an innate appreciation for logic that acts as a quiet alarm bell.
And finally, we looked at how all of this biological and psychological machinery applies to our moral lives. We saw that while academic models try to chart our ethics like a predictable machine reacting to environmental pressure, the reality is much more profound and demanding. We have free will. Every choice we make is an opportunity for internal adaptation. Every decision is a chance to build moral virtue and actually shape the person we are becoming.
From the dopamine in our synapses to the virtues in our character, our decisions are incredibly complex masterpieces of human design.
Which leaves us with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over as we wrap up today. We have learned today that our brains possess a hidden logical intuition. We have a subconscious alarm system that detects when we are making a mathematical or statistical error, like in the bat and ball puzzle.
Right, the conflict detection.
So here's the final question. Is it possible that we possess a similar hidden ethical intuition? Do we have a subconscious somatic alarm system that detects when a business decision or a corporate culture is morally flawed, long before our slow analytical brain steps in to rationalize and justify it with corporate jargon?
That is a chilling thought, because usually when a massive corporate scandal breaks, everyone says, how could they not know it was wrong?
Exactly. And if that ethical intuition does exist, if that quiet spark of moral conflict is firing in our subconscious, how many corporate scandals, how many failed marriages, how many personal regrets could be prevented if we simply learn to tune out the noise of our biases and actually listen to it?
That is an incredibly powerful question to carry with you today. We hope you take these insights about dopamine, biases, hidden logic, and virtue and apply them to the very next big decision you face. As always, thank you so much for joining us here on the Daily English Practice channel. We hope the deliberate pacing helped you follow along with these complex topics. If you found this deep dive valuable, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe so we can keep bringing you these conversations. Until next time, keep exploring the mystery of why you do the things you do.